I've found one thing that is absolutely the easiest thing that any manager can do to start building trust, psychological safety through personal connections on their team. And I call it icebreakers, because that's essentially what you're doing. If you are a new manager, there's a good chance you're missing out on the number one way that you could be increasing productivity on your team. It's simple, it's something you can implement immediately. And so that's why I want to talk about it on today's episode of the Leadership Launchpad. If this is your first time on the show, my name is Matt Jertson. I'm the founder of a company called Better Everyday Studios, where I work with organizations all across the planet to help make their leaders better. I started my career in the US Air Force and then was the head of training and development at SpaceX. So I've worked with a lot of organizations, and especially a lot of organizations that cared about team performance. And one of the simplest and most often overlooked things that managers can do to increase the performance of their team is building personal connections. I know it's overlooked because I used to overlook it, quite frankly. I was your typical hard-charging individual contributor where I cared about the work. I wanted to come in, I wanted to focus on what had to get done, and then I wanted to go home. And as a manager, I did the same thing. And I think that's common of a lot of individual contributors, because we forget that as an individual contributor, you are obviously judged on the work that you are able to get done. But when you become a people manager, it's not about the work that you get done. It's about the work that you help others get done. It's about bringing together a team of people who are able to get a lot done. And these personal connections are actually really, really important. Psychologists call the kind of discussion that I'm talking about phatic language. It's language that's kind of the connective tissue between conversations. It's not about anything in particular that's happened in the world. You might call it small talk, water cooler talk. It's you come into a meeting and you spend a few minutes chit-chatting. Studies have shown that kind of discussion, that kind of talk is really, really important for personal bonding. And personal bonding, a lot of research shows that it's incredibly important for team engagement, for people to feel like they belong in an organization. And I know that might sound crazy, but studies have shown that individuals who feel like they belong at work, they're 167% more engaged. And this is at a time where Gallup has shown that employee engagement can cost organizations as much as $2,000 a year per worker. So if you can do anything to increase that engagement, it's going to be incredibly important. Highly engaged employees and employees that feel like they belong on a team are also much more likely to stick around. And retention costs are huge. Did you realize that every employee that you have to replace, it can cost the organization anywhere from half their salary to 2 times their salary just to replace them? That's from decreases in productivity, from the time spent looking for them, for having to pay, a recruiter or a recruiting agency. The costs really mount up. And so anything that you can do as a manager to build up that connection, to make people more engaged, is going to make people stick around and lead to higher performance. One of the key ways that leads to higher performance is through creating a world of psychological safety, whether that's Amy Edmondson, a researcher who's really shown the improvements in performance through creating psychological safety, to authors like Patrick Lencioni, who in his book, The 5 Dysfunctions of a Team, talk about trust as being the foundational layer for creating high performance. If you don't have trust, then people aren't going to go out on a ledge. People aren't going to be willing to commit to, hitting high goals because they feel like you're going to hold it against them if they don't achieve it. So building that strong connection is incredibly important. But how do we do it? Because I think that can sound like kind of a squishy topic for a lot of people. And I've found one thing that is absolutely the easiest thing that any manager can do to start building trust, psychological safety through personal connections on their team. And I call it icebreakers, because that's essentially what you're doing. In team meetings, rather than spending 5 minutes just kind of chit-chatting, you as a manager can be a little bit more deliberate for how you spend those first couple minutes and have a planned icebreaker activity for, what the team is going to talk about. Activity that, let's not go that far. Let's not call it an activity. And it can start with something that's really simple. Starting to ask people, what did you do this weekend? Or what's a great movie you saw recently? Those kinds of questions can kind of get the ball rolling. I used this in a team that I led a number of years ago when I was at SpaceX. And we kind of went through phases where we were a new team because we had grown a lot, so people didn't know each other very well. And so we started off with really low stakes questions, like, what did you do this weekend? And then as people got used to sharing about themselves and saying a little bit more about what was going on outside of work, we would ask questions like, well, what's something that you're looking forward to? Or what's a big goal that you have in your life right now? And then as those bonds grew really strong, we were able to shift into kind of bigger and more impactful questions, potentially, questions that not everybody would feel comfortable asking if you didn't have that lead up, of things like, what's a big failure you had or a setback you had recently in your life, and what did you learn from it? And these questions, they can seem small, but they're really effective at bringing a team together. They can get rid of a lot of anxiety. They can get rid of a lot of friction that happens on the team. And I saw that firsthand, where I had members of the team who didn't get along very well, or there was a lot of friction because they had different working styles. And simply by getting to know one another, what happened is these coworkers saw each other as humans, as people, as individuals, rather than just coworkers. And so a lot of that friction just kind of went away. Now, I know the first thing that at least some managers think to when I suggest you start asking these questions, they immediately say, well, that wouldn't work on my team. We have, introverted people, we have people who aren't sure. When I'm teaching workshops, I always follow up the exercise where we talk about doing this with, okay, why aren't people on your team going to be involved? What are some of the things that are going to prevent them from bringing things up? And they talk about bad past experiences, maybe where they used to be on teams that didn't really talk about this stuff, or maybe they were punished for talking about this stuff, or maybe, and it is true, some people are more introverted. It could be their culture. I remember meeting with one individual who she, was from a much more closed off and, culture that just didn't share personal things at work. And somebody was asking her, she was away from her family for a long time. And somebody was asking her, oh, is that hard? Do you wish you were closer to your family? And she completely lost respect for her leader because she felt it was a completely inappropriate question to ask. And so I grant that every situation is different and every individual is different. And that's why you have to have a plan for how you're going to be introducing this into your team. I think so how do you get started with this? One of the best ways to get started with something like this, if you want to be using these kind of icebreaker discussions in your meetings to help bring people together, is to be upfront with people of saying, hey, I have this new thing that I want to try. I think it's really great that we are spending a lot of our time, that we spend most of our time talking about work, and we want to stay that way. But I do want us to get to know each other a little bit better, because I think that'll improve our working relationships. And so what I want to do is spend the first 5 minutes of every meeting just, kind of touching on some different topic. And, so that's how you approach it, how you let people know that this is what you're going to be doing. And then you have kind of a plan of attack of, again, starting with those low stakes questions, seeing how they go, and then, kind of raising the stakes ideally as you go forward, as people get more comfortable answering the question. So there's a few things that are really important with this plan. One is kind of having that plan of attack of knowing what questions you're going to ask. So you don't start off by asking, hey, what's a big failure you had this week? And everybody's like shocked because they've never done anything like that before. But it's also important to put some kind of time bounds on it, because I think the reason why so many people try to avoid chit chat in meetings is because all of a sudden you've been going for 15 minutes and it's a 30-minute meeting and you're not going to get to the primary topics that you want to talk about. You definitely want to avoid that. So having a strategy for what questions you're going to be asking is really important. And then having a strategy for how you're going to kind of box in the conversation and make sure it's a segment of the meeting, but it doesn't expand to take over the whole meeting. This obviously applies in a lot of other meetings as well. It doesn't just have to be, kind of a group setting for your whole team. It could be on a one-on-one setting as well. Most people actually get the purpose of one-on-ones wrong. I think the normal one-on-one that happens between a manager and their employees out there, I would venture to say, is very tactically focused. It's focused on what are the actions of the day, what are the blockers, what's on the roadmap. And don't get me wrong, those are important things, and sometimes you need to talk to them. But the best one-on-ones, the best managers find a way to kind of put that information largely elsewhere, at least like the update portion of it. You shouldn't be having just kind of a download of updates during your one-on-one. They can, put that in a Confluence page or put it in an email. Your one-on-one should be reserved for asking questions or getting support, right, for things that they can't figure out, and for building those personal connections. It's your opportunity to get to know the people on your team a little bit better. And as you build those connections, you're going to build that trust. And it's important to remember that you are setting the standard for your team. If you set the standard that it's okay to talk about these things at work, that we want to, get to know each other better in order to function better as a team, that tone is going to spread throughout your team. If you as the manager are staying very closed off and just focused on, the tasks that have to get done, then chances are your team's going to think the same way and they're just going to stay focused on that. So to summarize, to sum this all up, personal connection is incredibly important. We have tons of research showing all the statistics of just how much it can help your team. It drives engagement, decreases retention, improves performance, and it can be really simple. Right? Having just 5 minutes at the beginning of a team meeting to talk about non-work things, help each other, create a space for people to get to know each other a little bit better. I guarantee you give it 4 weeks, 8 weeks of doing something like this for your team, you're going to see a big difference in the quality of the relationships, the amount of trust that people have, and how they will work together. I hope you find that helpful, and I hope to see you next time on the Leadership Launchpad. Thank you so much for listening to today's show. If you are looking for help turning your organization's great engineers into great managers, me and my team at Better Everyday Studios would love to help. We deliver targeted and interactive training workshops that are designed to help build the 3 fundamental skills of any new manager: building trust, giving feedback, and setting goals. Reach out to me through matt@bettereverydaystudios.com so we can start making your organization better every day.